Hello, everyone, and just wanted to let you know that I felt that this topic was important enough that we should cover it in one additional lesson, and that is the development of the Magna Carta and some of the specifics of Magna Carta, because it lays the foundation for Western democracy, and any democracy that you experience has its roots in this document. So it's very important to look over. Again, I would introduce you to another text, and when you get into the higher grades, especially those who are in 9A, when you go to 10th grade next year, you will have me for Ancient Near East, and we will cover how there were a couple of laws that preceded Magna Carta that reflected some of the ideas, but again, that was more for the Ancient Near East, and basically Western history caught up to that idea eventually at this late time. So Magna Carta was written about a year before King John died. He really didn't have a lot of time after it was signed before he passed away. But King John, while signing it and pretty much being forced to sign it, he didn't totally accept it. And he complained and he whined and was like, oh, I really don't want to do this. I can ignore this, right? And basically they said, no. And that's something I may have missed writing down, but I will be sure to cover it. All right, so causation. Everything that happens in history has a chain of causation. That simply means why it happened, why it was, I guess, necessary. You know, causation, let's say you go to the doctor, and your toe is almost completely cut off and bleeding, and you're in pain and agony. The first thing that the doctor is going to try, he's probably going to be doing things while I ask you a question, and that is, why or how did this happen? Because he has to treat it, and to treat it, he needs to know, was this a dog bite, a shark bite? Did you play with a razor blade and you almost cut off your toe? What was the series of steps that led to your illness? And that way he can understand how to properly take care of you, or where there might be a hidden problem. And so with history, events, especially like Magna Carta, do not just simply happen. People did not simply arrive one day at the place where this was signed. This was signed in a city called Runnymede, and just said, hey, let's sign this document. Now, there were a lot of events that led up to it. So one of the things which led to Magna Carta was the frequent wars with King Philip II Augustus. King John was continually fighting him for more land and over interference in his affairs. King Philip was also trying to largely influence policy and change events that were happening in the lands that King John possessed in France. It's very complicated. It's a very complicated situation with a feudal structure, and it would take me it would probably take a course on its own, a class on its own, before I could explain it, so I won't here. But there were many wars with King Philip Augustus. What that resulted in was a draining of manpower, money, and really enthusiasm by the barons, many of whom not only had allegiance to King John, but had some allegiance to, or sole allegiance to, King Philip. So Philip had lands in England, England had lands in France, and this was not really working out very well. So draining of manpower, many men died in these wars. Hundreds, thousands were dying in each battle, and these are some men as old as 50 years old, some boys as young as 14 and 13. So, and all in between. So the wars were killing off men who were in the best position to be farming, to be raising a family, and to be creating future Britons and Englishmen and women. So wars do not just kill people, they actually can kill a nation and its future by draining the very people with whom it is dependent upon. You know, once this person died, they were no longer going into a field and working and raising food and crops, which were necessary for all the people who were not fighting. So it was causing a lot of troubles there. Also, this was a time when money was in physical form, actual coins, not even paper, but a coin. And you did not have inexhaustible supplies. It wasn't that the government could simply issue digits to your bank account and say, oh, you have money. There was only so much metal that had been taken out of the ground and only so much metal that could be transformed into currency. And that was being drained away as well, because King John, when he would stop at your manor or your castle, he would not only take all your food, he would do what in English is called a shakedown. He would almost literally come to you and shake you for money to see what money fell out of your coat and your pockets. He was getting a lot of money out of people on a voluntary basis and involuntary basis. So these wars and King John's taking money began to result in financial weakness for England. There was another issue that was going on, and that was abuse by local officials and disappearance of people in prison for political, personal, or even unknown reasons. So one of the big problems was that what's called a bailiff or a sheriff, so a person who enforces the law on a local level, basically the police. The police were stopping in homes of people that they just didn't like. They take your father, your mother, your brother, or your sister, and throw you in jail and quite literally lose the keys. No trial, no hearings, no charges, nothing. They just put you in jail and forget about you. And most people died in these prisons. And again, some of them were for political disagreements. Others were just, you had a personal gripe with this person and you had the authority to take them to jail and you did so. There were other times when maybe the sheriff or bailiff was mentally unstable and just wanted to bring terror to a community, and they would take these people in the middle of the night, come into their home, grab them, throw them in jail, and no longer be seen. So this made people very frightened. And the king, and this is one that I should have written down, and I apologize for that, but when people would come to the king and try to resolve this problem, they were faced with one or of two problems. He would either say, I'm the king, and I can do what I want, and I want to let this continue, so no, I'm not going to rescue your person, your husband, wife, child from jail. I'm not going to oppose this sheriff or bailiff. Or you might not get the same treatment. So person A gets a favorable response. and person B gets an unfavorable response. There was no consistency of law. There was no justice. Nobody knew on what day the law was and what they could expect if they had a problem. And this produces fear, worry, anxiety. People don't want to live in that kind of country. People don't want to live in that kind of society. And if you have a king who believes he can do anything he wants without any questioning, and if you believe that your husband or wife or child could disappear in the middle of the night, and then you're told you have to go fight for this person, you know, there was a strong negative reaction to that. And people wanted to know that if they went to the courts, if they went to the police, not only were they safe, but they would actually find consistent justice. Every time I go to the police, I know what the result will be on this issue. So again, reasons. King John insisted that the barons and nobles had no rights and must give him money whenever he wanted. Give me money. The barons were losing men who helped cultivate the ground and supported the economy and life in general. England as a whole lost money and men. A lot of people were missing due to unlawful arrest. And even King John himself did this. He seized people, put them in castles that were remote and untraceable, and they would die in those places. He personally took land that was not his and sold it to gain money or simply to add to his personal wealth. Now, I want to add something because I know you're probably scratching your head about a couple of things, particularly in light of the last video that I made, and perhaps you have read some additional material on Britannica.com. Understand, and I generally do not make moral judgments regarding the past. And up until this point, all of these things had been normal, everyday life for hundreds of years. Nobody had known anything else. People were demanding change. Particularly the barons were now demanding that change. So this was a significant social movement. In some ways, you could call this a social revolution because people were finally angry enough, upset enough, and they were like, we need to take action, and we're going to go to war against our own king in order to make these changes. And that's what they did. They had two barons' wars, which resulted in essentially a defeat for King John. King John did not want to sign Magna Carta, and they met in a field near a farm called Runnymede, and he's basically poked and prodded with swords and with this huge number of barons and lords from all over England who say, sign this document and lose your absolute power. You're going to be limited in what you can do. So we saw in the last lesson this picture of the Magna Carta. It doesn't look like a list. You know, when you see it online and in some places it looks like a list, this is what it looks like in reality. So what did Magna Carta guarantee? In brief, a free Church of England with no Catholic Church oversight. Very big deal for the English. The Pope could not have and did not have any authority in England to make decisions for the English people. The Pope was becoming something of a bureaucrat, absolute king in his own right, and insisted that he had near king power, near absolute power over England. And England was saying, no, we have a king and his name is John. You had an assembly of all nobles, lords, and other leaders to decide whether a tax should be imposed. The time, the place, and the manner being announced well before the event, so people could reasonably make it. So like classes, we tell you what time your class is at, how long it will be, and we tell you as much as we can before it happens so you can be to class on time. And we say, all right, you're late to class. We told you 3 months ago, 2 weeks ago, that this is when class is going to be. Same thing here. They had to announce when the assembly was going to be, how long it was going to take, and you had to give them a month or two to make it to the assembly. And that way it ensured that it was a lawful assembly. No one was to be put in prison or put on trial without distinct charges. And those charges had to be verified with witnesses and with evidence. Basically, you could not be thrown into jail in the middle of the night for no reason. This principle will continue to be developed. This idea will be continued to develop and result in what is called habeas corpus. Habeas meaning produce, corpus meaning body. So you would have to produce the body. You had to bring your prisoner before a judge who would impartially decide whether that person deserved being in jail or not. You are to receive justice. All citizens were to receive justice without having to pay a bribe, without having to pay what is called bail excessively, and without regard to citizenship. You are also, it says, no taxation without the consent of the entire council. Essentially, this would later be reduced in an easy to remember saying, no taxation without representation. You could not be taxed by the government without your representative approving that tax. And this happens every day in the Kuril in Mongolia. You have a parliament, and they represent you, they represent your parents, they represent the voters who sent them to there, and they have to agree to a law and vote on it in a majority. And no tax, nothing can be done without that approving body. That is how we ensure that we have democracy. Your homework assignment is to Google Magna Carta. And there are quite a few rights guaranteed, at least 42, I think around 50, but 42 are reprinted in a book that I have. I want you to search a specific right. So like no tax shall be imposed except by common consent of all the council. No taxation without representation. I want you to memorize that phrase, but also, and I would like to see you write down about 21 times, no taxation without representation. Remember that phrase. It will guide you through life in a very good way. But go ahead and look up a different item, and then you're to write 2 paragraphs with no word count requirement. You're to write a first paragraph on that right and what it would mean to you right now. How does it apply to your life or to your parents' life? How can you take something from 12:15 and apply it to 2020. Also, again, no specific word count requirement. I want you to write another paragraph on how it would have felt to be somebody in England at this time with this right. How would you feel? Would you feel happy? Would you feel sad? Would you, how might it apply to your life in that time? So how does it apply now, and how does it apply then? This is especially for 9A and 8A. 8B and lower, same thing, but I understand if you need additional help doing it. If you understand English really well, if you have a high English level, I require you, I am calling upon you and saying you must help your lower classmen and those who do not understand English as well. And you need to translate this assignment, and you need to help them. You're going to serve as like captains. So it's like it being in the army. I'm the general, you're the captains, these are your troops. So you're going to pass along this homework assignment, share with them in Mongolian what they are required to do, and you as a captain, as an English speaker, are to help process this homework and bring it to me. I'm going to be making a separate video regarding this. But I know who you are. I know those who can speak English well. So, do not fail me. Do not disappoint me. Thank you, guys. Have a good night or good day.